Imagine you push open the door of a forgotten log cabin deep in the Siberian taiga. The wood is rotted, the hinges squeal like an animal's cry. A smell hits you dry, ancient, but with something metallic beneath it, like rust or blood carried on the wind of time. Inside, daylight falls in thin blades through cracks in the warped walls. Dust drifts lazily, disturbed only by your breath. And there, at a rough wooden table, sit two skeletons, upright, facing one another. Their skulls tilted as though mid-conversation, the smaller one, clearly a boy. The larger, unmistakably a man. In front of them, two cracked enamel mugs, a deck of Soviet-era playing cards. And between them, resting on the table like a ghost that waited 14 years to be noticed, an old, wind-up pocket watch, its glass face shattered but its hands frozen at 3:17, a moment captured in death. A question carved into eternity. Who were they? And why did no one find them until now? The year was 1996. The father, Yuri Antonov, 42 years old. A factory mechanic from Krasnoyarsk, known to friends as reserved but deeply devoted to his family. He loved fishing, playing the accordion, and had an old superstition about always carrying his late father's pocket watch, the very one later found on that cabin table. The son, Misha, only 11, a boy with restless curiosity. His mother used to say he had the soul of a wolf pup, always eager to explore, ask questions, run ahead on the trail. He collected insects in jars, sketched trees in his school notebooks, and dreamed of one day being a forest ranger. On the morning of July 7, 1996, Yuri told his wife, Anya, that he and Misha were going just for a few days, a camping trip into the Siberian taiga. He promised to return by the weekend. Anya remembers her son's final words at the door. Papa says we'll see, dear. He carried a small canvas backpack. Inside, a sketch pad, 2 pencils, and a lucky stone he had found at the riverbank the week before. That stone, smooth gray and faintly oval, would later become a symbolic echo in the investigation. The plan was simple. They would take a bus to a logging road north of Lesnoy settlement, then hike a 2-day trail into the forest. Yuri wanted to show his son the abandoned hunting cabin his father once used in the 1960s. Witnesses. The bus driver recalled a man and boy boarding at 6:15 a.m. The boy was excited, chatty like a bird. A local hunter, drinking at the roadside kiosk that morning, later told police he saw the two carrying fishing rods and supplies. Looked like city folk, he said. Not prepared for real taiga. That was the last confirmed sighting. No one saw them reach the cabin. No one saw them return. By July 12th, when they did not come home, Anya went to the local militia. She insisted this was not a case of a runaway or a father absconding with his child. Yuri is not that man, she told them. But by then, days had already passed. The search began sluggishly. 2 police officers, a dog team, a handful of volunteers. Helicopters were requested but delayed fuel shortages. Bureaucracy. The taiga is not forgiving. It is an ocean of trees. Larch, pine, birch. Endless. Every hill looks the same. Every path vanishes under moss. Rivers fork into streams and then disappear underground. Rescuers found small traces at first. Campfire ring with charred fish bones. A child's footprint near a stream bed. An empty box of matches branded Sovietsky Ogan. Then nothing. The dogs lost the scent. The forest seemed to swallow the trail whole. Anya stood at the edge of the search site, clutching the pocket knife her husband always carried when camping. She told journalists she felt as if the forest had taken her family. Night after night, she waited by the phone, listening to the silence grow heavier. Weeks turned to months. Posters with their faces, father and son smiling stiffly in a family portrait, were taped to bus stops, nailed to trees, pinned in grocery shops. Rain warped the paper. Sun bleached the ink. Eventually, they became little more than pale, ghostly outlines staring out at strangers who stopped noticing. Every year, on July 7th, Anya lit 2 candles in their kitchen. By 2000, she was lighting them alone as neighbors stopped coming. By 2005, the candles burned beside her only photograph of Misha, his school picture, smiling with uneven teeth. In her diary, later obtained by investigators, she wrote, "It is as if time has eaten them. But still, I wait. I wait for bones or for a miracle." Throughout every interview, Anya repeated one thing: Yuri always carried his father's pocket watch. "If he is gone," she said, "you will know him by that watch." That watch would later become the haunting centerpiece of the rediscovery. In 2010, 14 years later, a group of hunters, pushing deeper into the taiga, stumbled upon something strange, a clearing they did not recognize. A collapsed roofline peeking through overgrown moss. An abandoned cabin. When they forced the door open, they swore they heard something fall inside, as if disturbed after decades of silence. And then they saw the table, 2 skeletons, father and son, sitting as though time had not moved, the enamel mugs, the playing cards, and the watch, its broken face forever frozen at 3:17. But the strangest detail, the one that would baffle investigators for years, was not the skeletons themselves. It was what lay beneath the boy's bony hand, a small, smooth stone, oval, gray, the very same stone he had called his lucky charm back in 1996, and etched crudely into the tabletop beside him, scratched with a knife or nail, 3 words. In Russian, "Don't trust him." The discovery in 2010 rattled not just the small settlement of Lesnoy, but the entire Krasnoyarsk region. 2 skeletons posed upright at a table, in a cabin no one had seen in decades. The hunters who stumbled upon it swore they did not touch a thing. They simply backed out, closed the door, and walked 30 kilometers until they could reach a forestry station. One of them later told a journalist, "The silence inside that cabin felt wrong, like they'd been waiting for us." The forensic team that followed would confirm the skeletons matched the missing father and son. But nothing could explain the way they were found. 2 mugs, 2 cards face up, the boy's hand gripping his lucky stone, the knife-scratched words in the wood, "Don't trust him." The case had transformed from a long-forgotten disappearance into something darker. When the cabin was finally examined, every object became evidence. The skeletons were remarkably preserved, their bones clean, with faint signs of rodent activity, but no full scavenging. The dry, cold conditions of the taiga had slowed decomposition. The enamel mugs still bore faint rings of tea residue. The pocket watch was analyzed. Experts confirmed it had stopped not from winding down, but from a sharp impact shattered suddenly at 3:17. The carving on the table, "Don't trust him," matched neither Yuri's nor Misha's handwriting samples, though handwriting analysis on wood is tenuous at best. Then there was the boy's lucky stone, still clutched tight. For Anya, when investigators showed her photos, it was undeniable. "That is his," she whispered. "He never left it behind." But the most haunting forensic detail was what they found inside the boy's mouth. Wedged between his jawbones, caught against crooked teeth splinters of wood, as if he had bitten down on something desperately before death, investigators revisited the Antonov family. By 2010, Anya was gray-haired, living alone in a small apartment. When she was told her husband and son had been found, she collapsed on the kitchen floor. In a recorded interview, she said, "I begged for their bodies, not for this. Not for them sitting there, like dolls waiting for me to come." Friends of Yuri recalled a man who worked overtime at the factory, rarely drank, and cared for his son fiercely. But there was one detail that surfaced again and again. Yuri had been growing restless in 1996. He spoke of wanting to leave the city, live closer to the land, teach Misha the old ways. Co-workers remembered him mentioning an acquaintance from his Youth, someone who knew the Taiga better than anyone, but when pressed, no one could recall a name. As the rediscovery dominated headlines, speculation grew. Who was the him? Some believed it pointed to an outsider, perhaps a hunter, a stranger met along the trail. Others whispered it might have been a third man traveling with them, someone deliberately left out of the original story. Police files revealed something long buried. In 1996, early in the investigation, a logger had reported seeing 3 figures walking the old road into the forest, 2 matching Yuri and his son, and a third, taller man carrying a rifle. That lead was noted, then ignored. Now, it resurfaced with chilling clarity. Could Yuri have taken his son into the forest with another man? Someone he trusted, at least at first? Detectives reopened the case files. They combed through Yuri's past. One name emerged: Sergei Lobanov, a former co-worker of Yuri's father. A trapper. A recluse. Rumors swirled that he lived off-grid in the Taiga, trading pelts for vodka in nearby villages. Witnesses remembered Yuri mentioning Sergei before he disappeared. A man who promised he could teach them how to survive where others die. But Sergei himself? By 2010, he was gone. His last known cabin had burned in 2003. No official records. No grave. Still, the suspicion was enough to ignite theories. Had Sergei joined them? Had Yuri brought his son into the Taiga under the guidance of a dangerous man? If so, why had the boy or the father carved that warning? When journalists asked Anya if she had ever heard of Sergei, she shook her head. My husband never told me. If he brought someone with them, why didn't he say? Her voice cracked. I keep thinking, did my son see something I never will? Is that why he wrote those words? The idea that her 11-year-old boy may have tried to warn the world before dying, that haunted her more than the discovery itself. The pocket watch reappeared in investigators' notes. The shattered glass. The frozen time of 3:17. They began to suspect it was not coincidence. Perhaps it marked the exact moment something violent occurred inside the cabin. The watch became both evidence and symbol. A frozen heartbeat. A father's heirloom, now a clue to murder. But there was one last chilling detail uncovered during the renewed investigation. Beneath the floorboards of the cabin, when forensics pulled up warped planks, they found scraps of fabric. Not belonging to Yuri, not belonging to Misha, a torn piece of camouflage cloth. And beneath it, buried shallow in the soil, the rusted tip of a rifle barrel. Someone else had been there. By the fall of 2010, the case had exploded across Russian media. The rediscovery of the Antonovs was no longer just a local tragedy, it had become a national obsession. Every newspaper headline echoed the same haunting phrase carved into that cabin table. Don't trust him. But who was him? Police combed through leads, but the forest seemed to hold its secrets tighter than ever. Detectives pursued the only concrete suspicion. Sergei Lobanov. OV.O logging records confirmed he had worked alongside Yuri's father in the 1970s. Hunters in the region described him as a man half wolf, half shadow. He lived alone, wore patched camouflage, and carried a battered Mosin Nagant rifle. Some remembered him bringing pelts to barter in small villages. Others whispered about sudden disappearances of dogs, missing goats. Nothing was proven, but one story stood out. In 1994, 2 hikers from Novosibirsk vanished in the Taiga near Sergei's territory. Their bodies were never recovered. Police at the time dismissed it wolves. The cold, bad luck, but in the light of the Antonovs' cabin, the coincidence felt more sinister. The rusted rifle tip recovered beneath the cabin floor was carefully analyzed. It matched the barrel length of a Mosin Nagant. Investigators cross-referenced old hunting licenses. Sergei Lobanov had owned one, and though the gun was too decayed for ballistics, the fragments of camouflage cloth buried with it only deepened the suspicion. Someone had hidden evidence beneath the very floor where the Antonovs died. But why leave the father and son posed at the table, rather than destroy or scatter the remains? In interviews, Anya grew increasingly hollow. She spoke less of hope, more of betrayal. "If there was another man," she whispered, "then my husband. He brought danger to my child. He trusted the wrong person." Her grief shifted, no longer just loss, but gnawing anger. She clung to one object the police returned to her, the shattered pocket watch. At night, she would wind it, even though it could not tick. She said she liked to hear the faint rattle, as if her husband's voice still lived inside. But Sergei was not the only suspect. Some locals speculated that Yuri himself might have carved those words. "Don't trust him." Who did he mean? Another hunter? A stranger met on the trail? Or was it directed at himself? Journalists ran with the theory. A father gone mad in the forest, paranoia consuming him, turning on his own child. The evidence did not fully fit. But in the absence of a living suspect, the media twisted the story into something even darker. The years stretched on again. By 2012, documentaries had aired on Russian television. Foreign true crime forums obsessed over the Antonovs. Internet sleuths mapped the Taiga, trading theories, but official investigation slowed to a crawl. With Sergei presumed dead and no other leads, the case threatened to sink back into silence. Meanwhile, in Krasnoyarsk, Anya's world continued to shrink. Her apartment gathered dust. Missing posters yellowed in drawers. In her diary, she wrote one final line that investigators would later quote, "Everyone has forgotten them. Only the forest remembers." In 2013, a second expedition was launched, this time funded by a Moscow crime journal determined to uncover the truth. A team of journalists, accompanied by private investigators and forensic volunteers, trekked back into the Taiga. They wanted to scour every meter of the cabin site. What they found added another layer of horror. Behind the cabin, half swallowed by roots, was a small refuse pit. Inside, rusted cans, bones of hunted animals, and a child's torn boot. The boot matched the brand Misha wore in 1996. But here was the detail that unsettled the team most. The boot had been cut cleanly down the side with a knife, not torn, not weathered. Cut. Back inside the cabin, investigators re-examined the deck of playing cards. Only two were face up on the table, the King of Spades and the Jack of Hearts. For some, it was nothing. For others, it was symbolism. A father and son represented in cards. Or perhaps a message left behind by whoever staged the scene. The cards became a new motif in media. Coverage illustrations of a cruel game played in the forest, where two players never returned. One investigator made a chilling observation. The skeletons were seated across from each other, but the knives and utensils recovered from the cabin suggested a third seat had once been pulled to the table. Had there been a third man eating with them before death? If so, why was his skeleton not found? And more disturbingly, could he have walked away alive? When these details surfaced, Anya begged for clarity. "I don't care who it was," she said. "I just want to know, did my son suffer?" But investigators could not answer. The splinters in the boy's teeth, the cut boot, the carved words, all pointed to struggle. But nothing revealed how long it lasted, or why it ended in silence. In late 2013, one final discovery reignited the case. As part of the expedition, a forensic technician used ground-penetrating radar around the cabin. At a depth of half a meter, just beyond the tree line, they detected an anomaly. When they dug, they found a buried metal box rusted nearly through. Inside, scraps of paper, water-damaged, illegible. But one page remained partially intact, scrawled in pencil, in a shaky hand. "We are not alone here," the note unearthed in 2013. "We are not alone here" was the break investigators had been waiting for. Though much of the writing in the rusted box had dissolved into mush, forensic conservation restored fragments. They weren't from Yuri, they weren't in a child's hand. Either. The scrawl matched samples of Sergei Lobanov's handwriting, preserved from old hunting licenses. The recluse, long suspected of luring the Antonovs into the taiga, had left his mark, but the discovery raised a deeper, darker question. If Sergei wrote the words, "We are not alone here," who was the we? New forensic analysis of the skeletons revealed overlooked details. Yuri's bones bore hairline fractures on the ribs, consistent with blunt trauma before death. Misha's forearm showed a defensive fracture, as if he had raised his arm against a blow. Neither bore bullet holes. The cause of death could not be established, but investigators leaned toward violence inflicted inside the cabin. The carving, "Don't trust him," took on greater weight. It wasn't paranoia. It was a warning. Records pieced together a grim portrait of Sergei Lobanov. Born in 1949, he was the son of a gulag guard. Raised in harshness, he grew obsessed with survivalism, isolation, and control. By the 1980s, after losing work, he retreated entirely into the taiga. Neighbors called him the hermit with wolf eyes. Interviews suggested he resented outsiders who played at wilderness. He believed the taiga belonged only to those who could conquer it. When Yuri reconnected with him, hoping to show his son the old hunting cabin, Sergei likely saw weakness. A factory worker, a child, city people pretending to be wild. The investigators' theory was chilling. Sergei brought them into the taiga under the guise of mentorship, then turned on them a ritual of domination. He staged their skeletons at the table, preserved as trophies. And then he vanished back into the forest. The 2013 expedition pressed further into the taiga, seeking Sergei's rumored camps. 50 kilometers from the cabin, they found the remains of a burned shelter. Amid the ash, charred bones, human in origin. Too fragmented for full identification, but DNA traces suggested one male, aged between 50 to 60. If this was Sergei, he had died long before the Antonovs were rediscovered. Perhaps alone, consumed by the wilderness he worshipped. But there was something else. Beneath a stone, investigators found a tin box. Inside, personal effects, a rusted spoon, a journal with pages half-dashed decayed. And most disturbingly, a child's drawing, a pencil sketch of trees, a cabin, and a boy holding a stone in his hand. It was Misha's. The journal, painstakingly restored, revealed Sergei's twisted perspective. He wrote of teaching the father and son, of proving the boy could survive if cut from the weak. He described Yuri as soft, unfit for the taiga. One entry, blurred but still legible, sent chills through the team. The boy learns quickly. The father doubts. Soon he will choose, but the boy never chose. He resisted. And the warning carved into the table, "Don't trust him," was likely Misha's desperate act, scratched with shaking hands in the final hours. When these findings were presented to Anya, she wept silently. "My son," she said, "my brave boy." He tried to warn the world. She held the stone that had been returned from his hand, rubbing it as if it could warm again. For her, it became both unbearable and sacred, the last piece of Misha's spirit. There would be no trial. Sergei was gone, his body likely among the burned remains. Justice slipped through the cracks of time and wilderness. That all investigators could do was reconstruct the story. A father seeking a lesson in wilderness. A son full of wonder. A recluse consumed by cruelty. And a cabin that became their tomb. Today, the cabin still stands, rotting deeper into the forest. Its door hangs crooked, its roof caving under snow. Hunters avoid it, calling it Dom Teni, the House of Shadows. The playing cards are gone. The mugs collected as evidence. But etched into the wood, still visible if you brush away the moss, remain 3 words. Don't trust him. The story of Yuri and Misha Antonov lingers as one of Siberia's most haunting cold cases. Not because of what the forest did, but because of what one man's cruelty, obsession, and madness inflicted within it. And so the taiga remembers them. A watch stopped at 3:17. A boy's stone clutched until bone. A warning carved for no one who could come in time. It is a reminder that the wilderness does not kill blindly. It waits for the darkness of men to walk into it, and when it does, the forest keeps their secrets. In the silence of the Siberian taiga, long after candles have burned out and posters have faded, the cabin remains. Two skeletons seated forever at a table. A father, a son, and a question carved into wood that no time can erase. Who do we trust? When trust itself can kill.